Hey everyone, it's Ryder from Skip. 14 years ago, I was there when Russia invaded Georgia. I was in Georgia, passing by where the troops were lining up. Several hundred people died, including a few hundred civilians. That was the last major Russian invasion, and there are some eerie similarities between what happened then in 2008 and what's unfolding right now. Of course, we're already seeing effects on the economy, effects in the price of oil, things that will directly impact you. I want to talk about those direct effects, what you can expect as Russia and Ukraine edge closer to war, how we got here and why this is happening now, and why this playbook that Russia is using is so similar to what I experienced firsthand in 2008. Of course, the situation is evolving rapidly, but I hope this lends some perspective and some important takeaways for you. So how did we get here? Without getting into the history too much, since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia has continually felt pressure from the West, in particular NATO. This is a map of NATO countries in blue. As NATO has grown and as countries like Georgia and Ukraine have sought membership into NATO, Russia has seen that as a direct threat to their sphere of influence and to their power in Europe. So in 2008, I was living in the Republic of Georgia, doing urban planning and development work. Just like what we're seeing today in Ukraine, Russia sending troops into these breakaway regions. These are regions with perhaps more ethnic Russians than Georgians, who often claimed independence and had the support of Russia and the Kremlin. And as it turns out, in August 2008, just a couple days before war broke out, I was in Abkhazia, one of these contested regions with a large UN presence. And on the way back to the capital of Georgia, we saw Georgian troops lining the road because the fighting had begun in South Ossetia. Russia had invaded under similar pretenses to support a peacekeeping mission after there were some skirmishes and a little bit of fighting in the days prior. Now, this was August 8th, 2008, the day the first Beijing Olympics started. Fast forward 14 years, the Beijing Olympics Part 2 have ended. We've been seeing these simmering tensions for weeks, and now Russia has been sending peacekeeping troops into the contested areas in eastern Ukraine. This is similar to what I saw on the road 14 years ago. In the case of Georgia, like I said, several hundred people were killed. The Russian army advanced by land and by air in South Ossetia here, and by sea into Abkhazia, the region where I had just been, and they had gotten within about 20 miles of the Georgian capital. So here we are today in a similar situation, and again, very close to a mock battle. In the Georgian case, there was also some US military training and Russian military training in the month prior to that war. Georgia historically has had a major US troop presence. Here's the current map of where Russian troops are positioned around Ukraine. And of course, the question is, what does Putin want? Well, it's not a big surprise. We've seen this before. Russia feeling threatened because of NATO influence, because of the West influence, and trying to assert its power and its dominance under the auspices of supporting their breakaway regions. Now, whatever happens in these coming days and weeks, there's a lot at stake for the global economy. Countries depend on Russian oil. Many countries in Europe, in particular Western Europe, especially Germany, heavily rely on Russian gas. In addition, wheat, nickel, and other staples could feel the pain of price spikes. I already mentioned we've seen oil prices go up, and that can affect prices here in the US. Of course, inflation has already been increasing a lot of prices in the US, including gas and oil. But an outright attack by Russian troops could cause dizzying spikes in energy and food prices, fuel inflation fears, and spook investors, a combination that threatens investment and growth in economies around the world. It was the same case for me in Georgia. After 5 days of war, a ceasefire agreement was finally reached in that case. Then French President Nicolas Sarkozy intervened, helped broker a deal. Former US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice flew out to Georgia the day after the agreement was in place. Many of the investments in Georgia stopped. Investors, especially from Europe and the US, backed out because of the new risk that presented itself in Georgia. And I wouldn't be surprised if that same thing happened. Besides the several hundred people who were killed in the Georgian conflict, the other major issue was the hundreds of thousands of refugees. There were around 200,000 who were displaced. Now, Harvard economist Jason Furman is isn't too worried about the global economic consequences here. He says, quote, Russia is incredibly unimportant in the global economy except for oil and gas. It's basically a big gas station, is what he said. Of course, a closed gas station can be crippling for those who depend on it. The bottom line is that any stress here in terms of gas or food supply chains will further exacerbate the global supply chain situation and the mess that is affecting everyone. I hope there's a peaceful resolution and we don't see any of the history that I saw back in 2008. I'll keep you posted. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.